Spy 5 is a 2022 film starring Jessica Chastain, Diane Krueger, Lupita Nyong'o, Penelope Cruz, and Sebastian Stan, and was directed and co-written by Simon Kinberg. It focuses around a group of operatives from a variety of international intelligence agencies who band together to track down a piece of new, dangerous technology. I want to start off by saying I enjoyed this film. I love spy films, espionage thrillers, spy TV shows. I love it all. And while this is by no means breaking new ground for the genre, I did have a good time with it. The plot is fairly generic, and the explanation of the film's MacGuffin does feel like very well-trod ground. It's another one of those super powerful weapons that can hack into any system, giving the user the ability to control power grids and airplanes, you name it. And when those details are laid out early on, I did get a here we go again type of vibe. But once that's out of the way and you settle into the chase, the film is a lot of fun. A big factor in the enjoyment is the cast, and I did think the central quartet of characters were all quite well cast and did a good job with what they were given to work with. Jessica Chastain is the film's main character, a CIA operative, and she plays the usual sort of tough agent who doesn't let anyone get too close to her. That's an archetype that many spy movies, or just action movies in general, have, but she played it well. She handles herself very well in the action scenes, of which there are quite a few, and overall was a good choice for the leader of this team that forms. Lupita Nyong'o plays a former MI6 agent that Jessica Chastain recruits to help her track down the device after it initially slips away from her in Paris. Her character is also one of the usual suspects for this type of movie, the resident tech genius, the best in the world at tracking down and handling this type of technology. She's now working in the private sector, has a boyfriend in London, but is quite quick to go back into the field after being asked, due to the serious nature of the threat. The two of them are old friends, and they both do a good job portraying that in a limited amount of screen time for the setup. That history is shown very nicely in their ease while working together and the obvious trust between them. Diane Krueger is a German B&D agent who has also been tasked with capturing the device, but to bring it to the German government. It's a fairly abrasive character, another person who doesn't like to let others get close and seems to enjoy working alone, but her character did really grow on me as we went along. She's first introduced as something of a wild card, throwing a monkey wrench into Jessica Chastain's first attempt at retrieving the weapon when she tries to get it at the same time. There is initially tension that builds between those two characters as they meet up again shortly after, and both know the other is a rival agent with the same target. The two of them get a great fight scene in a fairly small space, a little room they both end up in, and it's very energetic and nicely shot. I'm not sure how much of that fight the two actresses did themselves, but if they did it all, I would not be surprised. They both acquit themselves extremely well in a variety of chases and fights throughout the movie. From there, though, once they decide to work together, the two have pretty good chemistry. It's demonstrated in little moments here and there, but it was enough. I like that trope of having former enemies working together. I know it's used a lot, but I can't help myself. There's something fun about watching people have a knockdown, drag-out fight, and then seeing them have each other's backs against a common enemy a little later on. Penelope Cruz plays a Colombian DNI agent and psychologist, and she was actually my favorite character in the movie. She has a husband and children back at home, and she's never been involved in field work before, but gets inadvertently roped into the mission. The reason for why she has to stick around with the team early on is a little weak, especially considering it's given to her by the tech wizard in the group. I'm sure there would have been some workaround they could have come up with, but I'm glad they didn't. Watching this inexperienced and fairly nervous rookie spy work through her first mission was fun. When her character is set up that way, I was expecting the movie to really exploit it for comedy, turning her into a bumbling agent causing trouble for the rest of them. And it really doesn't for the most part. There is some, to be sure, but I didn't mind them not leaning into it too heavily. There are some nice moments where she's constantly calling home to talk to her family, for example, and watching someone just calling home after a busy day at work when in reality they all just got through a gun battle together made for a different character for this type of movie. I could picture this type of character popping up in an old episode of The Man from U.N.C.L.E., so that's probably why I enjoyed it so much. The four of them do best together while they're in the midst of the action and the mission, Watching them work together is when their individual traits come out, and seeing their personalities bounce off each other is well illustrated. When the movie falters is when it intentionally sets aside time for them to bond, specifically in a scene at a restaurant where they're all discussing their first missions or something like that. It all feels really forced and obvious, and the movie doesn't need it. Those backstories that are revealed could have come out more organically elsewhere. And I just don't picture these people hanging out for some backslapping banter together. These are all talented actors, so I'm going to blame the script for those scenes where it feels like they're not gelling together. Bing Bing Fan has a smaller role in the movie as a Chinese MSS operative, and she was definitely the weakest part of the film for me. I believe I've seen her in a couple of other movies in small roles, so I don't have much to compare her performance here to, but it did feel pretty wooden. She's introduced much later on and is not a major character, so it doesn't affect the movie very much. She does, however, get a nice martial arts fight sequence towards the end that was quite enjoyable, fighting off a group of attackers with a pole of some kind. It all felt very Jackie Chan-ish, which is a good thing. Sebastian Stan plays Jessica Chastain's partner at the CIA, and I thought he was fine, not great, not bad. Just a fairly straightforward performance most of the time. He does get a chance to play a little against type in a few scenes, so I definitely enjoyed him more in those moments. So while a lot of the characters, including the bad guys, who I won't get into, are fairly surface level, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. It is an action film first and foremost, and I believe the action is overall quite good. My favorite sequence was a gunfight that begins at a fish market and then extends out to the docks and some cranes outside. At that point in the movie, the team hasn't assembled yet, so there are 4 different sides all at play, fighting one another and trying to catch the bad guy. Everyone is frantically scrambling to get ahead of the other agencies and also just stay alive. I don't mind when our heroes aren't always so successful, and during that scene they definitely are not. The chase, involving people tumbling down stairs and jumping across and sometimes missing shipping containers, was well staged. I also appreciated how when these characters are dangling off the side of something, it takes time to drag themselves back up to solid ground. Jessica Chastain, in particular, just got through fighting Diane Krueger for the last few minutes, and then ends up hanging on for dear life off the side of a shipping container, so showing her struggling to just pull herself back up was a nice touch. There was a fun foot chase through some narrow streets in Morocco that I also enjoyed. First of all, they're chasing a bad guy who looks a lot like Howie Mandel, so that was good, and then they're just casually taking out henchman after henchman while right in the middle of massive crowds. Which had me questioning the hearing abilities of everyone in this film. I mean, yes, they're using silencers, but someone gets shot and falls about 8 or 10 feet behind you and you just keep walking, none the wiser? It's not the only time it happens either. There are several moments where you have to think, these people are very wrapped up in their day-to-day activities that they are so oblivious to a gunfight happening out of the corner of their eye. The climactic action scene was also very good. It's not terribly graceful, but it's one of those, let's destroy a whole 2 floors of a hotel while spraying machine gun fire at everything in sight type of action sequences. All of the characters are given their moments during the scene, and the henchmen keep popping up by the dozen, so if you hadn't had your fill of gunplay by that point, you should by the end. The score was by Tom Holkenborg, and while it didn't really stand out to me that much, there are some moments that sound definitely inspired by the Bourne trilogy soundtracks. I don't mind when movies do that. It's not exactly the same, but just gives you that feeling. The music does get quite bombastic during the climax in the hotel, and that was nice. I say just go for it when you're in the middle of a big action scene like that. So as I said at the start, I had a great time with this movie. It's a big, glossy, international action film. It's not a masterpiece by far, but it's also not a sequel or a reboot. It's an original idea. I know it's not that original, but still, and it was produced by a major studio and filmed all over the world. Obviously, the ending is setting up for a sequel to come, but judging by the muted response it received at the beginning of this year, that likely will not be happening. If you're a fan of all things spies like I am, I'd highly recommend checking out the 355, and if you like action movies, check it out as well. Thanks for watching this review. If you enjoyed it, please check out my channel, Hildebrand Productions. I'd really appreciate it. Adios for now.